relax, partner, relax. Now, that's only Chico. That's Julio's goat.
It ran for 6 seasons, finished in the Nielsen Top 10 5 times, and gave America one of the most beloved characters in television history. But Sanford and Son nearly didn't make it to air, and when it did, the fights behind the scenes came close to destroying it more than once. This is the story of Sanford and Son, 1972, how the comedy hit was nearly erased.
Ah, yeah, I see him now.
Now, that's the trademark from some famous company. Now, that means this thing is valuable.
The British blueprint nobody wanted. The story starts not in Los Angeles, but in London. In 1962, the BBC launched a sitcom called Steptoe and Son, a comedy about a grumpy, manipulative widowed junk man named Albert Steptoe and his frustrated son Harold, who dreams of a better life but can never quite break free. Written by Ray Galton and Alan Simpson, Steptoe and Son ran until 1974 and became one of the most celebrated comedies in British television history. By the early 1970s, Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin had already done something remarkable with British television. They had taken Till Death Us Do Part, a British sitcom about a bigoted working-class patriarch, and turned it into All in the Family, which premiered on CBS in January 1971 and became an immediate cultural phenomenon. When a British agent came to Lear and Yorkin with the rights to Steptoe and Son, the producers saw a second opportunity to transplant a British format into American soil. The concept was straightforward. Take the father-son dynamic of Steptoe and Son, transplant it to the United States, and reset it in the black community. The location they chose was Watts, the Los Angeles neighborhood that most of America knew primarily from the 1965 civil rights uprising that had left 34 people dead and reshaped how the country talked about race and poverty in urban America. Setting a comedy there in 1972 was not a safe or neutral decision. It was deliberate. Lear later told USA Today that he came back from an early meeting with Fox sky high, saying the casting felt like an instant marriage between the performer and the material. The harder challenge was convincing a network to put it on the air.
Right here, load of hot copper.
No, we just cover this stuff up because...
Didn't want to get it rusty. It was going to rain last.
CBS passed and immediately regretted it. Before Sanford and Son ever reached NBC, Bud Yorkin took the concept to CBS. CBS was the home of All in the Family, already one of the highest-rated shows on American television. Yorkin thought they might want another Lear-produced comedy with a similar edge. He was wrong. CBS passed. Network president Fred Silverman later admitted it was one of the most embarrassing decisions of his career. "We had All in the Family on the air, and Bud and Norman came in with the idea," Silverman said, "and it was called Steptoe and Son. I said, I don't see it. I was wrong. It was one of the stupidest things I did at CBS." By the time Silverman made that admission, Sanford and Son had become one of the dominant forces in American television ratings and had helped NBC dominate Friday nights for years. NBC took the show as a mid-season replacement for the 1971-72 season, which meant a smaller initial episode order and less institutional investment than a full season pickup would have provided. It debuted on January 14, 1972, with 14 episodes ordered. Within months, it was clear that NBC had accidentally acquired one of the biggest shows on television. The show finished its first partial season in 6th place in the overall Nielsen ratings, an almost unheard-of achievement for a mid-season replacement.
Marijuana.
Marijuana! Wait, are you crazy? Okay.
The man nobody thought could do television. At the center of all of it was Red Fox, and the real question, the one that nearly stopped the show before it started: was whether a man with his reputation could possibly work on network television. Fox was born John Elroy Sanford on December 9, 1922, in St. Louis, Missouri. He dropped out of school at 16 and moved to New York City, eventually building a career on what were known as the Chitlin Circuit, the network of black-owned clubs and venues across the American South and urban North that hosted performers who had no access to mainstream venues during segregation. There, he developed the raunchy, fearless stand-up style that would make him famous and infamous in equal measure. He recorded more than 50 so-called party records, essentially X-rated stand-up albums, that sold millions of copies almost entirely through word of mouth and informal distribution. The New York Times would eventually call him the Dean of X-rated comedians. Getting him on network television required clearing a very high bar. His reputation was built on material that no broadcaster of the era would touch. What convinced Norman Lear that Fox could make the transition was seeing him perform in Las Vegas, where Fox had become the first black comedian to headline the Aladdin Hotel in 1966. Lear later described coming back from Las Vegas after watching Fox convinced that he was looking at a television star. The question was whether the audience at home would feel the same way, or whether the guardians of network broadcasting would step in first. Cleavon Little, later famous as Sheriff Bart in Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles, was reportedly one of the first people to suggest Fox for the role. Little had appeared with Fox in the 1970 film Cotton Comes to Harlem, directed by Ossie Davis. He was not available to play Lamont, but his recommendation helped push Fox to the front of the producers' thinking. The role that could have gone to an established television actor went instead to a man who had spent most of his career working in venues that mainstream America had never seen, and on records that mainstream America had technically never been allowed to buy.
Not Lamont, Kalunda. Kalunda. Say it.
Calendar.
Richard Pryor almost played Lamont. There was a parallel conversation happening about who would play Fred's son Lamont. At one point, the name being considered was Richard Pryor, who was himself emerging as one of the most fearless and original comedians in the country, and who had a direct connection to Fox's world. Pryor had performed at Fox's Los Angeles Comedy Club and was part of the same lineage of black performers who had come up through the underground circuit. Demon Wilson, who ultimately got the role, heard the Pryor discussion and pushed back directly. He told producers that you couldn't put two comedians opposite each other without one of them functioning as the straight man. He cited Rowan and Martin as an example. Dick Martin was the comedian, Dan Rowan the straight man. Wilson made his case, got the role, and the argument proved itself correct almost immediately. Bud Yorkin recalled the first time Fox and Wilson rehearsed together. Wilson had been doing stand-up on stage in Las Vegas where Fox was performing, and they had met just 4 days before reading together in front of the All in the Family cast. Yorkin said he had never heard people laugh like that the chemistry between them was instantaneous and undeniable. An NBC vice president who happened to be visiting the set that day reportedly ordered a pilot on the spot. Wilson's background was unusual for a sitcom lead. He had served in the Army's 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam from 1966 to 1968, where he was wounded and discharged as a decorated veteran. He then worked in live theater in New York, appearing in Broadway and off-Broadway productions before landing film and television work. His stage experience gave him a formal discipline that balanced perfectly against Fox's instinctive, improvisational energy.
My $49 specials. Good. Well, make me a suit with 2 pair of pants and a vest and throw in a pair of white socks.
The names behind the characters. One of the quieter stories running through Sanford and Son is how personally Red Fox approached the naming of nearly everyone in it. His own real birth name was John Elroy Sanford. His father's name was Fred Glenn Sanford. His older brother, who died at the age of 46, 5 years before the show began, was named Fred G. Sanford Jr. When Fox named the character he was playing Fred G. Sanford, he was doing something more than choosing a fictional name. He was putting his own family history on the screen every week, in front of millions of viewers. Lamont Sanford was named after Lamont Ousley, a real person Fox had known since his teenage years in Chicago. Ousley had been in a washtub band with Fox, a group that evolved into a combo called the Four Bonbons. The bond went back decades, and naming the Son character after him was another thread connecting the fictional world of the show to the actual texture of Fox's life. The name Fox himself performed under had its own backstory. He took red from the reddish tinge of his hair and skin, a nickname that had followed him since childhood. The surname Fox was borrowed from Jimmy Fox, the legendary first baseman who played for the Philadelphia Athletics and the Boston Red Sox in the 1930s. Fox admired the player and the name, and it stuck. The man known to millions as Red Fox spent his entire career performing under a name that was a tribute to a baseball player from the pre-war era.
I'm going to join my wife, Elizabeth.
Would you stop that?
See, it's Sanford and Son now, but when I'm gone...
The Quincy Jones theme and what it was supposed to sound like. The theme music to Sanford and Son, one of the most immediately recognizable pieces of television music ever recorded, was written by Quincy Jones. The piece was called The Street Beater, and Jones composed it specifically for the show. Quincy Jones later said that he did not initially believe any network would ever put Red Fox on national television. His reputation for underground material was so well established that Jones considered the network casting essentially a long shot. When the show moved forward regardless, Jones approached the theme with a specific goal. He wanted the music to sound the way Red Fox looked as Fred Sanford. The funky, slightly shambling quality of the piece, the bass line, the loose horns, was an attempt to capture the character's physical personality in musical form. The theme became inseparable from the show within weeks of the premiere. For anyone who watched television in the 1970s, a few notes of the opening is all it takes to bring the junkyard, the worn-out furniture, and Fox's face directly to mind. Jones had created something that felt both specific to the show and somehow representative of an entire era of American life.
Hey, Pop, would you come down here?
The walkout that almost ended everything. By the time Sanford and Son was heading into its third season in 1973, Red Fox was earning approximately $19,000 per episode. A significant sum, but not one that reflected what the show was generating for NBC and Tandem Productions. The show had finished second in the overall Nielsen ratings in both its first and second full seasons, trailing only All in the Family. It was propping up NBC's entire Friday night lineup, and Fox felt that his compensation had no relationship to the value he was creating. What Fox wanted was a 25% ownership stake in the series. That was the number he put forward, and Tandem Productions refused it. The dispute escalated, and while taping episodes for the 1973 to 74 season, Fox walked off the show. He and his physician cited health issues, nervous exhaustion, claustrophobia, and calcification between the fifth and sixth vertebrae in his back. But the underlying reality was a contract dispute that neither side was willing to resolve quickly. Tandem Productions sued Fox and later also sued Demond Wilson, who had joined Fox in the walkout at the start of season 4 out of solidarity with his co-star. the lawsuit sought $10 million and claimed breach of contract. NBC and Tandem publicly stated that Fox had shown up at the studio brandishing a pearl-handled revolver, though the full context of that claim remained disputed. The show's writers had to do something fast. For the remaining 6 episodes of Season 3, Fred Sanford was written out entirely. The storyline explained that Fred had gone to St. Louis to attend his cousin's funeral, leaving his old friend Grady Wilson, played by Whitman Mayo, in charge of the junkyard. The episodes aired, the audience stayed, and the show survived the first crisis. Fox eventually returned, but only after being awarded a new contract that, at the time, tied for the richest salary on network television. He had walked out with almost nothing and come back with everything he had demanded. The lesson was not lost on the industry.
Hey, Lamont, come here quick.
Huh?
Listen to this. I started singing the blues today.
CBS passed on Lamont too. After 6 seasons, when Fox finally left for good in 1977 to host a variety show on ABC, NBC turned to Demon Wilson. The network wanted to continue Sanford and Son with Wilson as the lead, and Wilson was open to it, but only at a salary that reflected his value as the show's second-billed star in a series that had been one of the most watched programs on television for 5 years. NBC refused to meet his number. Wilson walked. NBC was now without both leads. Rather than cancel the show outright, the network produced Sanford Arms, a spin-off in which a character named Phil Wheeler moved into the Sanford property and attempted to run the rooming house next door as a hotel. The original junkyard characters, Fred, Lamont, Aunt Esther, Grady, were largely absent. The show lasted 8 episodes and was canceled. A short-lived revival called Sanford premiered in 1980, with Fox returning to the role of Fred. It ran for 2 seasons before ending for the final time. CBS president Fred Silverman, who had passed on the show a decade earlier, was now running NBC. The irony was not subtle.
Yeah, I just did my mirrors. Wipe that ugly off your face.
LaWanda Page and the role Fox refused to lose. Aunt Esther, the Bible-quoting, finger-pointing sister of Fred's late wife, Elizabeth, became one of the most beloved recurring characters in the show's run. LaWanda Page played her with a specific kind of theatrical fury that could match Fred's insults blow for blow. The chemistry between Fox and Page was unlike anything else on the show. It nearly didn't happen. Page, who had known Fox for years and who had her own history as a stand-up comedian, she had a burlesque act billed as the Bronze Goddess of Fire and was reportedly able to light cigarettes with her fingertips, auditioned for the role, and froze. The audition she gave did not impress the producers. They were prepared to move on to someone else. Fox refused. He went to the producers and told them directly that was LaWanda Page. He knew what she could do, and they needed to give him time with her before making any decision. They relented. Fox worked with her, she came back, and the role was hers. Page told Jet magazine in 1977 that Fox had essentially saved her place in the show by refusing to accept the producer's initial judgment.
Hey, what you doing?
I was just helping you with your bath. Would you like your back scrubbed?
Richard Pryor and Paul Mooney in the writer's room. The first season of Sanford and Son was largely written by white writers, a disparity that Fox and others on the show noticed and complained about publicly. The criticism was specific, that the scripts were not always capturing the authentic texture of the Black experience the show was supposed to represent. Changes followed. In the show's second season, Richard Pryor and his frequent creative partner Paul Mooney were brought in to write. Pryor was not yet the fully transformed solo artist he would become by the mid-1970s. but he was already operating at a different level from most working comedians. And his connection to Fox's world, he had performed at Fox's Los Angeles Comedy Club, made the collaboration natural. Pryor and Mooney wrote 2 episodes together during season 2, one titled The Dowry and another called Sanford and Son and Sister Makes 3. The episodes dealt with subjects that most television at the time was not addressing at all. Director Stan Lathan was also brought in, one of the first black directors to get substantial work in Hollywood, building a career from his time on the show that would eventually span decades in the industry. The changes behind the camera shifted something in front of it as well. The show had always had a specific flavor, but with more authentic voices in the room, the writing got sharper and the humor cut deeper.
Mike, thank goodness you saved the cake!
The Brady Bunch didn't survive the competition. One measure of how dominant Sanford and Son became in the ratings is what happened to the shows it was competing against. When Sanford and Son premiered in January 1972, ABC's Friday night lineup included The Brady Bunch, one of the most heavily promoted family comedies on American television, which had been running since 1969 and had an enormous built-in audience of younger viewers. By 1974, The Brady Bunch was gone. The show had been driven off the air in significant part by the audience erosion caused by Sanford and Son pulling viewers away on Friday nights. A show that had seemed like a fixture of the schedule simply could not survive in the same time slot as Fred and Lamont. By the 1974-75 season, Sanford and Son was so dominant that its presence at 8 p.m. on Friday lifted the entire NBC Friday lineup into the top tier of the ratings. Chico and the Man, following immediately after, finished 3rd for the season. The Rockford Files and Police Woman, which aired later in the evening, placed 12th and 15th respectively. The whole night ran on the energy that Sanford and Son generated at the opening. What Fox carried on to the set every week. One of the details that tends to get lost in the broader story is how personally Red Fox inhabited the character of Fred Sanford, not just in name, but in specific behavioral tics borrowed directly from his own life and family. Fox was 49 years old when the show began. Fred Sanford was supposed to be 65. To make the age difference believable, Fox dyed his hair gray, wore makeup to age his face, and wore heavy shoes that gave Fred his distinctive wobbling walk. Every week, he was transforming himself into a version of old age that he had not yet actually reached. The fake heart attacks, Fred clutching his chest, staggering, threatening to go be with his wife Elizabeth in heaven, came directly from Fox's memories of his own mother, Mary. She had routinely faked illnesses and exaggerated physical complaints to get her children to do what she wanted. Fox once described Fred's heart attack maneuver as something he had watched his mother perform his entire childhood, now refined into a running comedy bit for a national audience. The character's bigotry, Fred's reflexive slurs aimed at the Puerto Rican neighbor, Julio, at Lamont's Japanese-American friend, Achu, at nearly everyone who crossed his path, was written as transparent and self-defeating, balanced by Lamont's embarrassed patience and the obvious love underneath the insults. It was deliberately messy. It did not arrive with a lesson attached. That was part of what made it so unusual.
How would you like an old goat to give you one across your lip?
You know, you give bad vibes, man. I'm leaving.
Good.
The legacy that kept growing after the show ended. By the time Sanford and Son ended its run in March 1977, the ground it had broken was already visible in what had grown up around it. Good Times had premiered in 1974. The Jeffersons had launched in 1975. What's Happening premiered in 1976. All of them owed something to what Sanford and Son had demonstrated. That a predominantly black cast could anchor a top 10 show, that black comedy could be authentic rather than sanitized without losing a mass audience, and that networks had been leaving enormous ratings and revenue on the table by avoiding this territory for decades. The show's influence moved through comedy in ways that extended well beyond television. Red Fox is cited as a direct influence by Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, and Jamie Foxx, the last of whom took his stage surname from Fox as an act of deliberate tribute, carrying the name forward into a new generation of performers. Richard Pryor's time in the Sanford writers' room was one thread in a creative development that would lead to some of the most consequential stand-up comedy of the 1970s and 1980s. Bernie Mac named Fox as a foundational influence. The lineage runs long and wide. In 2007, Time magazine placed Sanford and Son on its list of the 100 best TV shows of all time. The show continues in syndication. The theme music is instantly recognized by people who have never seen a single episode. Red Fox died on October 11th, 1991, on the set of a new sitcom called The Royal Family. He collapsed during rehearsal. His co-stars initially thought it was another one of Fred Sanford's fake heart attacks. It was not. He was 68 years old. Sanford and Son came within a network's hesitation of never existing at all. A CBS pass, a studio lawsuit, a walkout, a title character who by all conventional industry logic had no business being on primetime television. Any one of those things could have ended it. None of them did. And the show that survived all of it went on to change what American television looked like, who got to be on it, and what it was allowed to say. If this brought back some memories, go ahead and leave a like. And if you want more videos like this one, subscribe and stick around.